Hello, everyone, and welcome to a conversation about biotechnology and entrepreneurship sponsored by the Lioness magazine. My name is Ramani Varanasi, and I'm your host, if you will, for today. I'm the interviewer, and I'm a biopharma executive and former CEO of Biotics Therapeutics, a biotech company developing novel antibiotic therapies. And I'm really pleased to be joined here today by Marian Nakada, Vice President of Venture Investments for Johnson & Johnson Innovation, or JJDC. Welcome, Marian.
Great. Thanks for having me, Ramani. I really look forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. I'm really pleased you're here, Marian. And I've been, I've told you, Marian, but our listeners also know that, or our viewers, I should say, know that I typically interview entrepreneurs who have launched and are building their businesses. But this time, I really want to focus our discussion, really on the entrepreneurship from an investor's perspective. And you were the perfect person when I thought about sort of switching gears and focusing the discussion from that angle. And so you're the perfect person to engage with on this topic. Now, just a brief introduction for the viewers about you, Marian, and I'll start us off a little bit and feel free to please fill in the gaps here. So you've got 30 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, so a real experienced individual here we have today, starting with your career in the lab in the lab at the bench at Centocor, and then you moved into a research leadership role before Centocor's acquisition by Johnson & Johnson in 1999. You then transitioned into a business development role where you executed many deals and you supported expansion of the biologics portfolio. And then in, I believe, 2013, you joined the corporate venture group. So we'll talk a little bit about your transition because that's always an interesting thing for people to hear about. But I know in working with you and interacting with you over the years that you're really passionate about leveraging J&J's capabilities to help portfolio companies succeed. So we'll dive into that a little bit. And I will say for everyone that I've had the pleasure of working with Marian on a couple of recent industry projects, and I've seen Marian at her best at J&J Innovations, and I know how she thinks, and she's very strategic, and she's asks a lot of great questions, which really causes people to kind of step back and think, and we'll come to how that plays into, Marian, you interacting with entrepreneurs as you engage with them. You are a master networker and connector. And that's, I think, a critical piece that we'll come back to in terms of just networking and connecting with entrepreneurs. And you bring the perspective of the topic of entrepreneurialism, both as a senior executive in the industry, an investor, and also a board member, because you do serve on many boards. So with that introduction, Marian, let's kind of dive right in, if that's okay. Sure. So could you, for us, just give us sort of a recap or an overview of what your role specifically is within the innovation group at J&J, and what's the mission of that group overall?
Yep. So Johnson & Johnson is, well, as you know, it's a global healthcare company, and the overarching mission is to change the trajectory of human health. And so for all of us, that is our guiding star. I'm in the corporate venture group, which is relatively small. There's about 13 of us investors that invest globally. And we invest in the three sectors that Johnson & Johnson has: pharmaceuticals, devices, and consumer. And I'm a pharmaceutical investor based in Boston. And my responsibility is to do pharma investments for everything on the East Coast. So we have a regional and a sector mandate. And the investments that we do are all things that are on strategy for the Johnson & Johnson businesses.
Okay. Well, so let's talk about the on strategy. So therefore, what are the types of investments that actually get your attention? I mean, your focus is pharmaceuticals. There's a lot happening in that sector, biopharmaceuticals. Yes. I mean, this past year, COVID has impacted the world in so many ways, but it's actually given kind of a turbo boost, if you will, to the biotech, biopharma industry. So that's great. As an investor, you're kind of looking at lots of riches out there, right? You've got the perspective of looking at a variety of investments, but what really gets your goat or grabs your attention, if you will?
Right. So as a corporate investor, we are, I call it super strategic. Now, not all corporate investors are like us. Some of them are purely financial, but we're strategic first. So it has to fit So for example, with pharmaceuticals and what Janssen is pursuing, and there's certain areas of interest that Janssen has. And so when I invest, there's pros and cons to the way it works, but I need a lot of planets to align. So I need a strategic fit, the scientific fit. I need to have the business work. I need to have it be investable in the team. But that strategic lens is really important. And what's great is we have a team in our innovation center in Boston that helps in terms of defining that fit. So we have 5 different therapeutic areas: neuroscience, cardiovascular, and metabolism, oncology, immunology, and infectious diseases. And those folks are the ones that help me define what is on strategy for the Janssen business. So it's great to be able to work as a team. So it has to be on strategy as it relates to like the indication, the specific disease often. But then from a more general perspective, it has to be novel, because we're not going to do a reformulation of a chemo, let's say, because in our minds, that's not novel and transformational enough. And then it also has to be credible. In other words, what they're pitching has to have the appropriate, I would say, scientific and business model and team credibility. And so we do evaluate those, the pitches for those aspects also, because it's not going to be investable if you don't have the appropriate team or business plan. So those are the things I think that resonate with us most.
And so I get this. So based on what you've said, I get you're a strategic investor. Most strategic VCs don't lead investments. They're typically part of a syndicate. Is that pretty much the same for you all?
For us, actually, it's interesting. We will lead, I would say, maybe a third to half the time, more so in the device and the consumer space, where there are times when, for example, we can lead an investment and actually get some sort of specific rights, hard or soft. In pharma, it's probably less, but we will do it if there is a compelling reason. And so, willing to do the heavy lifting with the diligence, et cetera. So there are times when we will actually do that on occasion. And then the other interesting point is we do invest at all stages, from like seed, de-risking notes, where we could be, let's say, the only investor that is defining what is that de-risking event that we need, and willing to have a convertible note fund that. And we can come in at Series A, B, C. We can come in at later stages. We'll do pipes to support business development deals. So we really use a very full range of deal structures. And yeah, to the point, we will lead. If it makes sense.
Yeah.
And we also do form some new companies. So although we don't do it at scale with other venture firms, it is something that entrepreneurs can keep in mind, because although it's not as well known, that is something that we are trying to enhance and increase in the future.
Right. I've seen you getting involved in these sort of, for lack of a better term, maybe incubator pitches. You're often a panelist, or not a panelist, but a judge in these pitch competitions. Talk to us a little bit about maybe your involvement. Maybe, I don't know if it's on a personal side, sort of outside the J&J innovation environment, or whether it's on behalf of JJDC and your role there. But talk to us about some of the pitch competitions you've been involved in, because that really connects the entrepreneurial world, where you have entrepreneurs pitching to you, to the investment side of things, right? You're not out there looking at CEOs who are looking to raise a Series B or Series C, who've sort of been through it already, although that's also part of what your remit is. But really, this discussion is about the seed, from the beginning to when an entrepreneur first gets their first dollar or set of dollars. So talk to us a little bit about your engagement and involvement in, this sort of world of pitching and competitions, because there's so many that are happening on a daily basis, and specifically in the biotech area as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we're asked a lot to participate, since folks know about Johnson & Johnson innovation, and we're happy to participate, to be able to provide input, to give, visibility to entrepreneurs, to let folks know what's of interest to us. And it's also a great way to support the ecosystem, because a lot of the advice that we give to the folks who are pitching is advice that can be taken advantage of by any number of entrepreneurs. And we do our best to make sure that we're constructive in terms of the feedback that we give. And we also feel as if it's an important tool for the ecosystem for us to network, because, if it weren't for COVID, we would all also be getting together and usually having, a networking event around the pitch event. And, we think that is a great venue for folks to get in front of VCs who may not have the relationships that the more veteran CEOs have with specific investors or venture firms. I mean, one of my favorite is one that we've dubbed the Lobster Pot. I think we had our 7th annual, and it's women entrepreneurs pitching to women VCs. So that's real fun, and that's co-sponsored by Women in Bio. But and by the same token, I also am doing, I wouldn't call it pitch mentoring, but mentoring through Springboard, which is another organization that helps in terms of elevating women CEOs through teams of mentors who help to refine not just the pitch, because the pitch is really the delivery, but also the business plan and the whole premise behind the company.
Well, you actually have kind of walked us right to a perfect segue here, which is kind of a question I have on the list of questions. And that is, what defines the perfect pitch, the perfect opportunity versus the not so perfect pitch? So tell us a little bit about do's and don'ts in terms of how an entrepreneur should approach you and what kind of pitch they should give.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the don'ts. So on a positive note. So one don't, and it's not a hard fast don't, but I would say don't make cold calls. I mean, wouldn't you agree, Ramani?
Absolutely.
And what I mean by that is, if you can get in to an investor through your network, that's how you want to do it, because we get inundated with opportunities. And so, and then oftentimes you might be sending a pitch while I'm trying to get a deal across the line, and I cannot, look at anything because I am so, immersed with that. So if you can find who might know that person you're trying to reach out to and get a warm introduction, I highly recommend it. So that's one don't. Another don't is if you get your foot in the door and you're giving a pitch, or you don't even get your foot in the door because the email response is thanks, but not in strategy or no interest, don't take it personally, right? And then the third thing is, if you are in front of an audience and there's a lot of difficult questions, do not lose your confidence. Do not hesitate. Do not, recoil, stand firm and be confident, answer the questions, but don't feel as if challenge is something that should, set you on your heels. So those are some don'ts.
Can I just make a comment there, Marian? Because I have pitched, I raised money for my venture, built a company, sort of have seen all stages of that. One of the things I've done, tell me if you agree with this, is if you don't know the answer to a question, it's okay to say, I don't know, but I'll get back to it. I mean,
totally.
Okay. So, because I find when, entrepreneurs feel, women in particular, because they feel they have to sort of overshoot to be able to be confident that they know enough and are good enough. They sort of try to fill in the blanks and feel the need to have the answers to everything. But I think we're all only human, right? At the end of the day, it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that, or here's my CSO or my CFO, I'll hand it to them to answer. So talk to us a little bit about maybe, and I'll let you continue on the what to do, but talk to us a little bit about the pitch and maybe the CEO or the entrepreneur pitching, and how does the team to the extent there's a team right there next to them, get involved in that pitch also?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it all different ways where it's just the CEO speaking, and then it's the CSO or other folks or CBO that are addressing questions. I've also seen, interactive presentations where they'll pass the baton. I think it all works well. It's good to know that, the team works well together. That being said, sometimes it's just the CEO that gives the pitch and there is no team. And I don't think that that's necessarily bad. By the same token, it's fine. It's fine for there to. It just depends on and what stage you're at. Also, in other words, is it purely non-confidential? Is it this is the first meeting under CDA where we almost expect a team a little bit. So I think as long as it's effective, I think we're sort of agnostic to that. That being said, a really strong C-suite is where any of them in the C-suite could give the pitch.
That's true. That is so true.
Right.
That's an important takeaway for any person who's an entrepreneur. That's willing to or wanting to get in front of any investor. That's a great point.
Oh, so let me get to the do's for pitching. One is to be clear and really importantly concise. I've seen pitches where it's not clear. It's like, I don't even understand what your idea is. I mean, sometimes there's a concern on a non-confidential pitch to give too much away. But if you're going to do that, you're going to potentially lose the opportunity to hook somebody, to put the CDA in place, right? So I've seen a lot of fear of, giving away the secret, but you're never going to get it funded if you're really going to hide too much. The other thing is being concise. And I've seen folks, if you have, let's say, a 45-minute pitch and they're on slide, 30 of 45 slides, and and the clock, times out. So that's not good use of time. The second thing is to get input in advance to the pitch and the business plan. Well, advance, you start pitching to VCs and take that advice to heart. You can't be wedded to everything, because if what you're wedded to is not going to be workable for investors, then you're never going to get anywhere, right? So you really need to be open to advice. And then the third thing, which is super odd, is which I've seen sometimes missing, is you have to have an ask. What is it that you're asking? So we really expect at the pitch, I'm looking for a $30 million Series A and I need a lead investor, right? In other words, as opposed to, we have a term sheet and we're looking for filling in X amount of the round. I mean, sometimes there's not even a dollar amount that's associated with milestones, because that's the other thing, is use of proceeds. I guess another thing I would suggest, and this is more of a nuance, but if you're looking for fundraising and you don't have a lead investor, don't go to the fill-in investors that never lead, right? Because it's all backwards. Because once you get the lead investor, they're going to have their own preconceived notions about how they want to fill the syndicate out, right? And you're also expending a lot of time and energy on people that aren't going to be the ones that you need to catalyze that moving forward. So you really need to do your homework on that front. So
let me ask you a question there, though. So, that's all well and good, and it makes complete sense. On the other hand, could you not look at it from the perspective of, I get experience standing in front of another investor, whether they're going to be a lead or not, in giving the pitch and getting feedback, and every investor pitch is a value-added pitch because there's an interaction taking place, number one. Number two, even if they don't lead, they've worked with lots of other groups that have led. And so it could be as simple as wow, I love that idea. I'm going to pick up the phone and call my collaborator investor, the investor I work with who does lead, because I'm going to tell them this is great and they ought to hear about it. Does it not work that way as well?
I think it does, but not in a sort of what I call scorched earth way. Don't take your Excel sheet and then just go from A to Z. Yeah. I think for the point of, if you think you have a friendly audience because you have an intro, or you think that, or for example, that they're really intent on helping diverse founders or entrepreneurs, right? So I think if there is a reason, for sure, Ramani, but I wouldn't necessarily go to any VC,
Yeah.
In others, it's more about how you strategize. So I totally agree with you that input and pitch feedback is really important, and an intro to a lead.
So, okay, so you talked about a couple of do's there. Can you tell us, without disclosing the names of the companies or anything, how many pitches that you hear really wow you, really are kind of, hit the ball out of the ballpark, versus how many are just kind of mediocre, versus how many fall below the line? And the reason I ask the question, I'm trying to get a sense of how well informed people who give the pitches, entrepreneurs, are when they come to you about how best to pitch.
I would say like 2% or knock it out of the ballpark.
Really?
It's really low. It's really low. And I think it's for a host of reasons. It's because, number one, there are so many pitches out there. It's also because a lot of the really amazing things don't even come across our desk as pitches, because they're already spoken for and oversubscribed, correct? Yeah. In other words, though the pitches that come to me, through the entrepreneur or not through another VC, that are somewhat unsolicited, are competing with all of these things, right? That don't go through that normal network, that are invented here within a VC fund that has, $1 billion to deploy, right? And so they are very strategically saying, this is the cream of the crop, and that would never get to like a knock on my door email pitch. Yeah. So that's I think the challenge, is that there are definite tiers, I would argue, of companies and how they're funded, and the outreach that you will get.
That's really interesting. I didn't think it was that low as a percentage, but again, this then leads me to the question, there's data out there. We all know, I know, we've talked about it, in terms of what percentage of women get funded. There was an article yesterday, I think, in Fierce Biotech about, certain maybe micro cap companies or mid cap companies, and how many women CEOs there were out of 150 some odd companies that were evaluated, and there were 13 women CEOs. So the question here is, why is the data the way it is? Meaning, why are women not being funded at the same rate and elevated to the position of CEOs at the same rate as men are? And I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but it's, I think, an apropos question, because you as an investor are looking at all these pitches. And I know part of what you're looking at is, clearly it's all about the science, the technology, the competitive market, the niche, or the needs that the particular product or technology platform fills or supports, the team. But then how much of what you look at in terms of the C-suite, and in particular the CEO or the entrepreneur pitching to you, is driven by exactly that, who the entrepreneur is, so woman versus man. So can you talk to us a little bit about why are the numbers so skewed, and what's it going to take to convert that?
So I think in part it has to do a little bit with the fact that one of the major roles of the CEO is to fundraise for the company. And then it gets to the whole VC, which is, I'm a corporate VC, is that the majority of VCs, meaning the decision makers at the top of those firms, the handful of partners that are deploying the capital and sitting on boards, the majority of them are men. And so this notion that those women have the same sort of deep, historical, trusted relationships that those VC men have had with more veteran CEOs, who by the numbers we know are mostly men. So when you go to try and fundraise and you are competing as a woman CEO with these very tight networks, that creates a challenge. So I think in part it has a little bit to do with fundraising, and it's not just VCs, by the way. It also, I would argue, could also go into, you know, bankers and other folks who are driving, you know, IPOs. And it's not just the private VCs, it's the crossovers, the hedge funds that are going to help you get there. So there's three sets of people: the private VCs, you know, the hedge funds, crossovers, and the bankers, who are majority like men, I would argue, right? And so now the question is, so I think there will be more women CEOs, and there will be more women who are successful, but all of those ranks have to diversify their trusted relationships and their ability to take risks on first-time XYZ, you know, first-time CEOs, to be able to really make a difference, because then we'll have more and more veteran, diverse CEOs and entrepreneurs. But breaking in and getting those numbers to improve, I think is going to take in part more diversification within the VCs, the hedge funds, the crossovers, the bankers, right? You know what I'm saying? So in other words, it's a bit of a ripple effect, and so I think that's one reason, you know, and to make, I think, the headwinds even more challenging is this notion that there's so few that people will point out, well, look at, you know, that company didn't work out, so I don't think we need, and that was led by a woman. So therefore, the if then, you would never say that if a company failed and there was a man at the helm. You would say, oh, you wouldn't make that association. But there's so few that the positive association seems to be eclipsed by the negative associations, perhaps.
Well, so, you know, we always say change starts at home, right? And so if we as an industry want to see more women entrepreneurs being funded, we have to see more women as investors, correct?
Agreed.
And so there as well, I should say, is a low percentage. We're seeing low percentages again there in terms of how many VCs or how many people who are in the chair of being able to make decisions to fund companies as investors are women. And so we got to change that equation as well, correct?
Yes.
I mean, it goes, the more women you have in those roles, investor roles, the more women will likely get funded. So on the point of women and probably diverse women, because we touched upon the concept of diversity there, how do you and how does your organization think about funding diversity? Is there a proactive effort to seek out diverse women founders and entrepreneurs?
So we definitely are interested in increasing the diversity of our own portfolio, which, by the way, has a decent amount of diversity. At least mine. I have two companies with female CEOs, one with a combination of a female CEO and board chair, which I'm very proud of. So one of my companies, like our deal team, it's there's 4 of us on the deal team. 5 of us on the deal team, we're all women. So
wow, that's great.
I guess we need some diversity there. The CEO is a female there. So anyway, so that being said, so I am proud of that. But that being said, JJDC definitely has a lens for how we can increase that. I mean, we're looking into approaches that some firms have, let's say having office hours or call for proposals for diverse entrepreneurs. And by the way, also put a plug for Founders, I think it's called Founders Factory with Sangeeta Bhatia. So in other words, founders who don't go out into the company, but the George Churches of the world that are catalytic, creating companies. We need more women doing that too. So we're looking at how to plug into efforts that we can participate, whether or not it's mentoring, whether or not it's giving them visibility to how we work, and trying to promote their companies into being in areas of strategic interest for us. All of those things are things that we are supporting. In addition, the notion about actually providing more white glove to support to diverse founders who come to us, and even if it's like not on strategy, which is something that I can't help, to be able to, number one, take the call, listen to the pitch with the intent of providing the feedback that we were talking about, adding robustness to that. And then I've actually literally introduced them to other VCs for which I think that they might be on strategy. So I've literally done that and referred them to like 5 of my VC friends, with actually, with a note to those folks, hey, I found this really interesting opportunity that is a diverse entrepreneur. I really think you need to listen to this pitch. And so creating, our own little grassroots mentoring group for these folks, because maybe, as a community, we can really help to elevate these people. And also say, come back, if you, as you iterate this, or you have questions, or you're wondering about who else to reach out to, come back to me, because, I'm available. So those are some of the ways we are trying to help the community, and also realizing that if it's a serial entrepreneur, maybe the next company that he or she is going to do will be on strategy, and they'll come back because we've started that dialogue and have that relationship.
I mean, you said it right. This whole industry, most industries, innovation and company building is all formed and based on relationships. But as we think about entrepreneurs, women in particular, you mentioned the 2 buzzwords, which we all think about and talk about: mentoring, which is critical. But I think even more critical than that is sponsorship. The notion that you are essentially elevating someone, by way of introducing them to people who might be better investors because that's within their sweet spot or strategy of investing. More people need to do that. We just need to have more people like yourself believe in an entrepreneur. And if you can't invest in them, say, you know what, I'll make a couple of introductions. Because it brings us back to one of the first comments you made in this discussion, which is do not, or I should say, do go with warm introductions, right? And so the last thing any entrepreneur wants to do is send 50 cold emails or pick up the phone and make 50 cold calls a day. And then the last thing I just want to bring up here is we are finding, or we're seeing more of these venture groups, women-founded venture groups being formed, right? There's women who invest, and then there's several other organizations that are venture groups, investment groups that are founded by women, for women. And, I think the more that movement picks up and the more we see investments into women, perhaps the traditional and standard VCs and strategic investors will come around the bend and see the light, if you will. I know that a lot of these institutional groups are actually actively thinking about increasing diversity and investment dollars going into women founders, and perhaps even at some point instituting a separate diversity fund, if you will, out of which they invest. And that's not here today, but it would be great to see a more of a proactive approach being taken by investors like yourself to support women entrepreneurs, because the numbers say it all. The business case is there, right? There's great ideas that come from women, and women just operate in a different way. They tend to be quite hands-on in a positive way, and there is success that they can create from the companies they found and drive. So that's great. I want to kind of wrap this up, Marian, just kind of come back to something we didn't get a chance I didn't get a chance to ask you to talk about, is you've had a great trajectory to get to where you are. Can you just spend a couple of minutes? Because I know some of the viewers and listeners are kind of curious about how does someone, with a science background get to be a VC and then think about supporting other entrepreneurs. So tell us about how you got to where you are. And then I have one final question I'll ask you.
Yep. Yeah. So I was always interested in science as a kid. I knew I wanted to be a scientist, but I didn't necessarily want to be a medical doctor. So I ended up majoring in biology in college and going to graduate school to get a PhD in pharmacology, which is, I would call it sort of the application of science to healthcare. And so joined Centocor, I guess now it's like over 30 years ago, which was developed Remicade. They were the antibody pioneers. And at the time was, I would say, a medium-sized startup, and was at the bench for the longest time. And one of my first transitions was actually from the bench to a manager when I realized I wouldn't be putting a lab coat on anymore. It was a little bit sad because I just love doing science and generating data. And then the next transition was from R&D, after leading a group, to transitioning to business development and doing transactions, and something that I thought that I wasn't going to enjoy, but I actually did. And so did that for a while. And then the next transition obviously was from business development to venture. And that was, a big pivot because although you're negotiating, it's a whole different world in terms of how you get deal flow and how you become part of the family of your portfolio companies by sitting on boards and managing them to an exit. So, but throughout, my guiding star is really similar to Johnson & Johnson's, which is why I enjoyed working for this company all these years, and that's the translation of basic science to improvements in human health.
Yeah. That's great. I've known you for a while, Marian, and I've seen your successes, and I've seen how you've been so proactive and outreaching and being such a part of the biopharma, sort of community and supporting entrepreneurs in general, but also women in particular. And I know you're involved in a variety of groups and driving change there. So appreciate your support there. I'm going to ask you one final question because, again, I think about the golden rule when I think about investors, and that is he or she who has the gold makes the rules, I guess, right? So as an entrepreneur, I pitched a lot to investors, and in some ways you're subservient to them because they have the money that you need. But at the end of the day, you're also like, well, that investor really doesn't get what I'm trying to say. So they're not the right investor for me. So as a person who's pitching to try to build a company, I did have the opportunity to say no to investors because it might not have been the right fit. But in general, you're always out trying to put the best impression out there. So investors have a particular space in our, they occupy a certain seat in our biopharma community, if you will. So let me kind of ask this question here. Being an investor, you think about a lot, you do a lot, you operate in so many different ways to effectuate change. What would you say your superpower is?
So I am in constant motion. So rather than say superpower, I'd say if I were a superhero, I would be a shark, which is what my kids say, which is so appropriate, right? Because the VCs on the TV show are in Shark Tank, right? Yeah. So that's kind of an irony. I mean, for me, there's in life, not just work, there is always more to do. So, and I have a lot of energy and a lot of passion, and that's why I can't stop.
I see that because you're on so many boards, you're advising, and you're on boards of nonprofits as well and for-profits, and you're advising so many different groups, and you're involved in all these industry-wide initiatives. You're an inspiration in many ways, Marian.
Thank you. You too, Romani.
Well, so I think we're going to wrap it up here. And I want to thank the audience, the viewers for listening in and joining us. It's been really good to chat with you, Marian, again. Thanks for taking the time to share your investor view of entrepreneurship. And I really wanted to have an investor's perspective as we disclose a lot of what we do in our industry to the Lioness magazine viewers. It's always good to reconfirm our knowledge about how to best attract and keep the attention of investors. And so having you on the call today was really great. And I want to thank Lioness Magazine as well for allowing us to have these types of conversations. Stay tuned for more discussions of this nature, more information about entrepreneurs who are out there who are trying to build their companies, and maybe we'll have a few more investors. But Marian, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with in terms of kind of final words for the audience?
No, I too appreciate Lioness Magazine and what they're doing to really advance entrepreneurship, and hoping that the conversation we've had today will help some of the listeners to get their companies funded.
Absolutely. And, don't be surprised, Marian, if any of the listeners today pick up the phone or maybe email you with possible ideas for pitches here. So,
LinkedIn, so.
Okay, thanks again. And we'll see you all soon.